Telling the bees. Bees, in this case the honeybee, have always been a vital part of society and sacred to many cultures worldwide. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that bees were created from the tears of the sun god Ra. The Greeks associated them with Cupid, and a community of honeybees has even been employed as a model of human society, including in the works of Aristotle, Plato, Virgil, Shakespeare, Marx, and Tolstoy, to name but a few. Amongst the symbolism and folklore, this matinori is about telling the bees. In a nutshell, or maybe a beehive, telling the bees is a tradition in many European countries that did spread further afield. The bees would have to be told of important events in their keepers' lives, such as births, marriages, departures, or returns in the household, but most commonly deaths. If the custom was omitted or forgotten and the bees were not put into mourning, then it was believed a penalty would have to be paid. It was also believed that it would be extremely bad luck to ignore the bees and not to tell them the news of a significant event. For to fail to tell the bees risked them to either cease production of honey, depart the hive, or worse, die themselves. The beehive is a reflection of society, and many superstitions relate to the importance of treating the bees as members or part of the family. As earlier said, originated in Europe, but soon travelling to the Americas, there is much evidence of the practice of telling the bees to let them know the death of the household. A 19th century account describes the practice as such. It would be done on a hive-by-hive basis, and the beekeeper would first knock on the hive before telling the news of the death. Then each hive would be covered by a black cloth or similar piece of fabric for the period of mourning. There is a story from Norfolk when a man bought a hive of bees at an auction. He noticed when he got them home they were looking very weak and lethargic. Now, being a man of the countryside and quite versed in folklore, he suspected that they might not have been able to mourn the death of their former owner. After draping the hives in a black cloth for a period of time, the bees apparently recovered. Now, who knows if this was the problem or not? Maybe it was a more plausible reason, but it also suggests to note that other beliefs that one should never pay money for a hive. This gentleman bought it at an auction. And if you use money to buy a hive, it is said that bees will not produce any honey. And you should purchase hives with honey and comb, which might be a bit difficult if you don't have a hive to begin with. Or maybe by exchanging it for a commodity of equal value, never money. A note of caution is that bees are peaceful creatures that only thrive on harmony in the household. If, for example, they hear too many arguments within the family, you risk them leaving their hives for good. In addition to this, bees dislike swearing. Other examples were that bees were sung to rather than using the spoken word. Some traditions insist that the words must rhyme. For example, bees, bees, awake, your master is dead and another you must take. If the bees begin to buzz after the information has been delivered, it is seen as a good omen. In other traditions, people would not only sing to the bees to announce death, but they'd also sing to encourage honey production. Particularly, a Christian belief was to sing hymns and psalms at the bees. It's also thought that bees could sing too and were heard humming loudly on Christmas Day to celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. And it was also thought that you could only move a hive on Good Friday. There is another custom that says when a family member suffers a bereavement, the eldest son must show the change had occurred by moving the hives slightly to the right or face the door of the family home. The ritual was called ricking. It was normally done when the deceased was being waked at home so the bees could see what was happened. Some of these practices may still happen today, and there's evidence of such activities recorded as little as 50 or so years ago. There is a report of bees attending a funeral, presumably after being told of the death of their beekeeper. In 1956, there was a report of a strange occurrence at the funeral of John Zepka, a beekeeper from the Berkshire Hills. As a funeral procession reached the grave, the mourners discovered swarms of bees hanging placidly from the ceilings and clinging to floral sprays. They did not annoy the mourners, they just remained immobile. Another case is from March 1961. in Shrewsbury. A retired postman and beekeeper passed away, so his children, on his wishes, completed the ritual of telling the bees to all 14 of his hives. On the day after the funeral, a memorial service was happening in the church. Swarms of bees were seen coming from this man's house, a mile and a half away as the crow flies. Similar to the previous case, they settled in great swarms on the flowered tributes and on the grave. By nightfall, they all returned to their hives in the man's cottage garden. Perhaps they were attracted to the flowers, or perhaps it was down to the telling of the bees the news, and they wanted to pay their final respects. These curious cases seem to confirm the need to tell the bees, further strengthening the conviction there exists a mournful sympathy between bees and humans. In my experience, honeybees are usually very calm, docile creatures with an extraordinary social structure. They have a very delicate ecosystem that needs to be looked after. Any change in temperature or disease could easily weaken them or make a hive perish altogether. This may be why we had a strong connection within our folklore. And with this context in mind, it is no wonder why we feel so connected, as without them, we would certainly perish too. There is a song, which I will not be singing, called Telling the Bees by Big, Big Train. It goes like this. My mother said, listen, son, your father's gone, now the time has come. You must tell the bees he gave his life, drape black cloth over the hives. Telling the bees, as old as these hills and as old as the stones, I feel it down to my soul. Now I am the keeper and the years passed by, until the day that Jenny caught my eye. I walked over and I asked her for a kiss, sweet taste of honey on her lips. Telling the bees, as old as these hills and as old as the stones, I feel it down to my soul. And the bees were told, on the day we wed, wildflower garlands draped our marriage bed. Now 2 years on, we have our son. The bees were told, and we carry on. Telling the bees, as old as these hills and as old as the stones, I feel it down to my soul. The joy is in the telling, the sorrow in the soul. Tears of happiness and sadness, let them flow. Telling the bees, I feel it down to my soul. Telling the bees, telling the bees.